Hey, Alec, what? This isn't Alec. What's going on here?
Mixing things up this week. Yes, I'm back. Rusty, I've been on here a few times.
Yeah. What's up? What are you here for? What are we talking about?
We're talking about the greatest television show possibly ever, Zach. We're talking about Survivor. There's a lot of hype surrounding season 41. We're not getting to that just yet. We'll be talking about that pretty
Yeah.
shortly. But yeah, we're just talking about all things Survivor, why we love the show, what's great about the show, and how it's evolved, and all of the things in between. I think it should be pretty good times.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring you on to talk about Survivor in general because we're going to be talking about Survivor 41 in some capacity.
Mm,
And I feel like it's appropriate to give some context before we start because, I have been doing the series with Alec for the longest time now, the past 2 years. Uh, which is usually what's been on Tarqaron, has been old school Survivor. I've been working him through Survivor chronologically from the beginning. And
mm-hmm.
part of that endeavor has required me to be spoiler free, so he doesn't know anything past the seasons we're on. We just finished Survivor Vanuatu recently,
Mm,
and so I have to keep that up as much as I can, So I don't really have an outlet to talk about modern Survivor too often or any of the Survivors since, and rather than wait until when we get to the season, I thought this would be fun, be able to have you come on and talk about just and be able to go all out.
mm-hmm.
So Alec, if you're watching this, is when you turn it off.
Exactly.
Absolutely, because we're gonna hold nothing back. Hold
Mm,
nothing back.
mm-hmm.
Um, so we're just gonna talk about this week. We're just talking about all of our love for Survivor in general, just favorites, favorite moments, favorite players, favorite seasons, what makes the game so good, how the game has changed. And then next week we're gonna gear up for 41 specifically. We'll have a whole draft for the cast. We'll break down the whole cast and talk about where the game seems to be heading now. But
Yeah.
here we are. I brought my Survivor, all my Survivor apparel. Well, I don't have the Survivor hat like you, but I have a like Survivor inspired hat, which is
Yeah.
Tarkaron themed.
I love it. You got your buff too.
I got buff. This is from Winners at War. I
Nice.
also have a black one, which was like the 20-year special one, which was cool. And I have old school Survivor
Mr.
shirt on.
Ethan Zahn. Love it.
I also brought my reading materials like the Boston
Boston
Rob
Robs.
rulebook,
Nice.
Strategies for Life. Which
Yeah.
this man talks this up so much as if it's like he wrote a book on Survivor. This is not a book on Survivor. He talks about like you need to refer to pasta as macaroni or something. He says stuff like that.
Oh my
Weird.
gosh.
Nobody likes a crybaby is the name of this chapter.
I love when he pulled
He's,
that book out during a reunion show, and Probst was like, "What is this? Is this actually a legitimate book?" And he's like, "Probst, I wrote a book. Like, buy it." You know?
yeah, and like he's just been riding the high of this book ever since.
Yeah.
It was in the straight up the preview for Island of the Idols. He was like, "I wrote a book on it." No, no you didn't. No, you did not. But I
Uh.
also have from Survivor the Australian Outback, Keith Famey's book. Yes, I can cook rice, and so can you.
Wow. That almost sounds like a joke. But
Classic. Signed by Keith himself,
wow.
third place finisher.
All the essential literary
Oh, and
works
here's a
for
little
Survivor.
the card that came with the old school Survivor,
Oh, nice.
all
Ethan.
forms of Ethan, and
What a beautiful man.
he's got a little signature on here. Zach, keep smiling.
Nice. That's awesome. He seems like a good dude.
Ethan's great. Ethan's someone I've got a greater appreciation for since this season. Because like when me and Alec talk about Survivor Africa and Ethan as a winner, it's like, he was okay. He was okay,
Yeah.
but it's like he got better, and I appreciate him more when he came back for Winners at War too. He was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
that was
Ethan,
sad.
I think one of the biggest things for me for Africa was when he got to see the kids and play soccer. Like you got to see a lot of his personality come out, and then he ate too much food and had to go to the bathroom, and there's that whole situation.
Hmm.
But certainly his final tribal was super lame. Like I just felt like he wasn't very articulate with his responses. He just didn't really formulate a convincing argument why he should win the game. But he won. Or no, he didn't win Survivor Africa.
He
Yeah, he
won.
did.
He won
Yeah.
Survivor Africa.
See, look, I'm on here to
That's
talk
how he
about
got the Winners
Survivor.
at War. It's crazy that guy didn't win and he still got a Winners at War.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
interesting. Definitely a miss on the producer's part, but But yeah, no, I guess I can go ahead and kick things off and just talk about one. I feel like I owe both you and Alec a thank you because I,
Mm-hmm.
for many years, had completely gone off the Survivor watching train. For one reason or another, I remember very vividly sitting in my mom's living room to watch the very first season of Survivor in Borneo. I was 7 years old. We were watching on our giant fat tube TV. We got our popcorn ready. It was one of those things that I don't remember the marketing because I was just so young, but I remember vividly watching through the entirety of that season, watching Richard Hatch win and all of the craziness that went on in between to the point where someone in my neighborhood that lived around my dad was like a local news station person, and he was putting together a commercial. And so, since Survivor was like the biggest thing at the time, he got together a bunch of people in the neighborhood to film this local TV ad about like some random product. I don't even know what it was. And so, my stepmom at the time was actually in the commercial, and they were all like sitting around the fire in these woods behind her house. So, just a very weird little tidbit. But I'd always been a huge fan for those earlier seasons, watching with my family. As Jeff says, nowadays it's like everyone loves Survivor Night. It's the big thing. Everyone gets their family together. No one can talk, type of thing. And that's kind of how it was when I was a young kid. But honestly, I think I stopped watching just because life got in the way around Palau. I think that's the last season I remember watching. But I just, for whatever reason, I didn't know that you guys were going through these seasons chronologically and reacting to them. And I think it was maybe Amazon where I was like, holy crap, not only you guys reviewing these episodes by episode, you're literally reacting and you're clipping footage and watching them. So for me, it's like I get to almost re-experience and relive some of those moments from when I was a kid, but also live vicariously through Alec because he's reacting to it as an adult, and it's authentic because, to your point, he's spoiler free. He's going through these things for the first time. So that's been a lot of fun. And then over the course of the pandemic, I'm sure a lot of people had their pandemic shows, their pandemic projects. And for my wife and I, she's someone who had never gone through Survivor, and she's someone who had zero interest in it. She's not a reality television person, but I said, please humor me and just watch a couple episodes. And so for her, I needed to pick a season where it would have been somewhat gripping for her. And so I thought Pearl Islands, I think, is that great season that some of the prior seasons, for whatever reason, it just doesn't hold up or stand the test of time for some people. But I think Pearl Islands, just the setting, the contestants, the things that go on, the things that literally change the course of the game moving forward. She was completely hooked, and we ended up binging like 35, 36 seasons over the past couple, I guess, year. So there's still a few seasons her and I haven't watched, but it's been such a fun time to revisit earlier seasons I've watched, and then watch your reactions, react with you guys, and then certainly discover seasons and contestants that I'd never seen up to this point.
Yeah, that's been such a fun experience taking Alec through because, it's not often that you can get someone who hasn't seen any Survivor,
Yeah.
and have them also be interested enough to talk about it week by week, so that, and then also keep them from going into Survivor spoilers, so that you can have this unique experience where it's like he's stuck in 2004 or something.
Yeah. Well, and also not know the cultural significance of the show too for him. Like to not know going into Marquesas who Boston Rob was. I think he kind of knew that he had played the Amazon or the Amazing Race with some other lady, but
With
he had
some
no
other lady.
context.
Yeah.
He had no context really his impact to Survivor and reality television. So that's been a lot of fun.
And it's so crucial to keep him not look up anything, because it's not like Boston Rob goes on once, he goes out pre-jury. It's like, okay, I can look up Boston Rob, right? No, you can't. Don't look up Boston Rob. Boston Rob goes to the end of All Stars and gets second place. It's like, okay, now I can look up Boston Rob, right? No. Don't.
No.
Heroes versus Villains. He comes out and he's pre-jury again, pre-merge, and it's like, okay, now he's done. All right, I can look him up. No, you still can't.
Redemption Island, baby.
Redemption Island. He comes back and wins.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, he's finally won. I can look him up. No, you still can't. All right, it's the whole thing. He'll be here. He'll be back for Island of the Idols for this thing, and then he'll be back the next season. It's like you can never look at anybody up. It's never safe.
Yep.
But that's like the biggest thing is like the fact that you could definitely think after watching Boston Rob, especially his first two seasons, like there's no reason not to look him up now. It's like you're not gonna You would never expect to bring someone onto 6 seasons of Survivor, but they do.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, and I think also just any repeat contestant, how Boston Rob when he came to Redemption Island, and that's a whole conversation in and of itself about how that season went. But you would think you'd know someone's strategy early on enough to know this is way too big of a threat. We got to get him out early, and he goes on to win. Now you can definitely critique the strategy that he used for the entirety of that game, but you still won nonetheless. And you've seen other contestants too come back and either win or make it really deep in the game.
I'm definitely interested in your thoughts on some of these seasons and these twists because I've been like ingrained in the Survivor community since like for years now, and I feel like I have a finger on the pulse of what the fans think generally. But you might not be so much into that realm.
No.
And so yeah, I started watching in season 19 was the first season we watched Samoa.
Oh, okay.
That's when we watched it live, and then so our second season we watched was Heroes versus Villains.
Wow.
So it's bizarre. It's a bizarre experience, but that's why I think even more. It's like, wow, we really loved Heroes vs. Villains, even watching it then, not knowing the people. So
Yeah.
imagine like getting Alec there, 20 seasons in the making. You've seen it all happen. It's got to be so much more impactful. You follow all those stories.
You're halfway there, so
Yeah, that'll be a
almost.
big milestone there. And you said you mentioned Pearl Islands. That was one I actually hadn't watched, and so I watched that for the first time when we did our reactions. But like within the Survivor community, it's like all these things, and since I was in the community, I just like I know all the winners because I would always look up winner rankings. I was curious what people thought, and like I knew the iconic moments like the dead grandmother thing, and I knew of Rupert and Sandra because they came back. So
Yep.
you just know stuff because it's in the Survivor zeitgeist, I guess. But
Yeah, for sure.
to see it firsthand, I was like, wow, that is one of my favorite seasons for sure. I
Yeah.
think it epitomizes old school Survivor and like the best of what it can offer for sure. And that's even with a twist that's like shades of twist to come that I'm not a fan of. The bringing people back. But I feel like in the context of this season, it's like it worked for what it was, and you actually had a good payoff where the people came back and they lasted so long and made a huge impact.
I mean, I don't know if Lil needed to get to the final two, but that's,
Yeah.
is what it is, I
It was
guess.
definitely an unfair. Like I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. I listen to Rob Has a Podcast, which is hosted by Rob's sister Nino,
Mm-hmm.
who is on the Amazon. I've been listening to a lot. I listened to him for years, but they've been doing a top 40 season countdown where they pulled their viewers basically, and then they've been releasing week by week from number 40 all the way to number 1. They've been having these huge discussions on each season, and so like we're just wrapping up now. They just released number 2. Number 1 is Heroes versus Villains, but number 3 was Pearl
Really?
Islands.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
it's up there. Kagayan is number 2. I started
One of my
listening to a
favorites.
podcast on that. I gotta tell you, Tony is probably my favorite player ever. He's my favorite player to watch. I was
Yep.
a huge fan of Tony. Like when I wasn't huge into the community and I was just watching with my family, I was huge into Tony. I loved him. And my family, like they really did not like Tony. He got on their nerves. But but he kept pulling off miracle after miracle. It's like this guy is not the guy I'd expect to make it to the end.
No.
And the beauty of Tony is that he had a miracle like win, not once but twice. To be one of the two-time winners to be Tony, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But he's such a
definitely
treat.
one of
He's
my
like
favorites.
he's the perfect combination of like a great player, but also someone who's really entertaining, who plays hard and is like great for confessionals. It's just like
Oh yeah.
all around, all you want in a player.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean Tony Kageyama is great. Winners at War is great, despite some of the things that happen. I think, in spite of a lot of things that happen, it's great because of Tony.
Yeah.
The fact that Tony won in spite of Edge of Extinction and in spite of everything working against him, like that's what helped redeem the season.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite moments in Survivor history in all 40 seasons is the fire making challenge at the very end. Like that's one of the most emotionally moving scenes in all of Survivor. It was one of the most intense in like with the music playing and everything like that, and not really knowing. I didn't know who was going to win Winners at War. My wife and I, we watched it completely blind. I didn't even know what contestants were on as the of the, however many winners ended up making it to that season. So getting to the very end, um, Natalie, Michelle, and then Lucina and Tony, I feel like it was only fitting that those two would go to the fire making challenge. I figured whoever wins that challenge is definitely winning the game or winning the season. I don't see as much of a testament as it is to Natalie's like perseverance, making it through all however many days it was at the edge of extinction. I still felt like even if you stayed out there for that long, being in the game is, I think, a bigger challenge in some ways, than being on the edge, just because you're more connected with the game. You're making the moves, and Natalie, that was part of her argument and part of what was Final Tribal was all about. But that last scene with Sarah saying, like, she was crying, I was crying, saying, if there's anyone I wanted to take me out of this game, it had to be Tony, and vice versa. If I was gonna take anyone out, I wanted it, or if Tony was gonna have anyone take him out, I wanted it to be me. And then she did the little ooh as she left, and Tony was just a mess. But I think one of the things that kills me most about that season is that COVID happened and there wasn't an official reunion, because I felt like there would have been so much great dialogue, and I would hope that they had also would have had an extended reunion, just because there's so much to unpack from that season and the way the game evolved with that season, introducing currency, Edge of Extinction. There's just so many variables to unpack there that I think was certainly fitting for a reunion. And it's definitely a bummer that they didn't have one, like an official one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we get just the fact of having 20 winners on that stage together is like would have been great. And to get the actual full Tony reveal, because now you get you look at a compilation of winner reveals. It's like you got this nice little Zoom call for the crowning of the king.
Yeah, for sure.
Winners of War is the one I could talk about a lot, because there's like so much I love from it and so much that I really don't like that they did with it. The first thing being Edge of Extinction, the fact. Well, what are your thoughts on Edge of Extinction in general? When you watch the first Edge of Extinction season, and you go into the final episode, and then this dude Chris Underwood, he got voted out third. He comes back and wins in the right at the end.
Yeah, I think it's a decent idea. I just don't think it works really well, because when you have an example like Chris, or even have an example like Natalie, I think the conversations are not really valuable in terms of, like, if Natalie makes it to the end and she has to plead her case of why she thinks she's deserving of Sole Survivor because she was out on the edge, basically kind of playing what the OG game of Survivor, where it was really just about like, finding food, making shelter, and just kind of surviving the elements, if you will.
A scavenger hunt.
Yeah, exactly. Racing up to the top of the island and getting blocks of wood or whatever.
Yeah.
I think for that, it kind of works. But I think Survivor Winners at War just try to introduce so much to make it this gargantuan thing, as opposed to what actually makes the most sense. And I think the currency makes sense in the context of the evolution of the game, right? Because to that point, there was no currency. I think it's a natural next step. But I think that, in addition to Edge of Extinction, just is kind of complicates it in a way that doesn't make the season fun. So yeah, Edge of Extinction was not something I was a very big fan of, because especially when it's Winners at War, it's meant to be cutthroat. When you get voted out, you're done, you're gone, you're out. And I think to see these people waste away on an island, I think it was just dead airtime, to be honest with you. Like, it's great to see Boston Rob and Amber, and when their families came and everything like that, like all of that was pretty fun. It was nice to have additional airtime with some of my favorite contestants. One of my favorite scenes, again, is when they came back for that final challenge and Jeff went down the line and asked each person, what does the game of Survivor mean to you? Like, that was a really special moment for me, having seen all of these seasons prior, especially All-Stars, and knowing where these people have come from, and just seeing how their lives have changed because of Survivor. But outside of that, I think the Edge of Extinction just doesn't do anything for me. What about you, though?
Yeah, my problem is that it's so poorly executed. The fact that you bring in the first season, I thought it was poorly executed, and the fact they brought it back in the second season and it was just as poorly executed, it was amazing to me, because they do this consistently with twists. Is they'll double down even though people don't like the twists, and they still won't work it out to a spot that fans want it to be. And a lot of things people have said is that with a lot of these twists, and Edge of Extinction probably would have been fine if they ended it at jury. You know, like you have one person come back at the merge, and then like not again. You don't bring someone back at the final 6 and give them an idol, and then like all this ammunition. Like Winners of War, they brought Natalie back, and she had an idol, and she had all this ammunition
Yeah.
of what everyone was saying on the Edge of Extinction to use against Tony, and it was a miracle that Tony was able to survive because she was just telling them how everybody is saying Tony's playing the best game, you know, and that would just been. I just think it's insulting when you get to the end and it's like Tony has to sit there next to this person who's arguing their case to win. He's like, I don't even know what you did. I didn't even see that island, and that's because I didn't get voted out. It's like, how am I supposed to argue? You just have to argue your case, and then she's arguing some other game over here. Like, what do you do with
They
that?
played. They were literally playing two completely different games. Not in the way of like, oh, strategy wise, you played two completely different games. You literally were on two separate islands, living two very different lives. You weren't playing together, and I think for that reason, you almost have to have two tribal councils: the people on the edge and the people on the real island. You know, at that point,
There's
because
no way you can justify to me voting Natalie to win over Tony, over anyone, over anyone. Like if you
that's
come
your
back from the edge.
exactly. I don't care. You pick anyone that was on the edge. I don't think anyone was more deserving of it than Tony, except for Lucina, Sarah.
Well, I'm saying, take Tony out. Tony won because he had to play the perfect game in order to win.
Yeah.
You could take someone like Michelle if it was like just Michelle versus Natalie. Michelle should win hands down. Like anyone who survives should win because you can't make an argument to me that it's like they got voted out, but they deserve to win the season because they played the Edge of Extinction so well. And this person who didn't get voted out never got to play the Edge of Extinction somehow should not deserve to win because of that.
Yeah.
You look at the fact they had the jury was made up of literally every person, which is also a mess. It's like the whole point is to have the jury be composed of people that actually work together.
Yep.
Ethan voted for Natalie because he never played with Tony before. He didn't know, he'd never met Tony. Tony was robbed of like what should have been a perfect vote basically.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, and Michelle deserves second place over them, but from what I've heard, some people wanted to throw votes to Michelle, but they were nervous that Natalie would win, so they had to vote for Tony just to make sure that nothing crazy happened, you know. So then Natalie or Michelle ends up being the third vote or 0 vote finalist, you know. And it's like, no, Natalie got voted out first. She got voted out first.
So being really close to kind of the survivor forums, Reddit, and whatever else, were there a lot of discussions of what could have been if Natalie had won? Like, do you think there would have been an uproar with the fan base if that would have happened?
Oh, it would have been awful, yeah. And that's the thing is that Tony was the only one that was surefire going to win. Even Sarah Lucina, there's been debate on whether she would have won. Like, it would have been a lot closer, apparently.
I think she would have won hands down.
But like talking to the cast after the fact, apparently it's like been close.
Really?
The votes would have been a lot closer because it was like a slam dunk for a lot of people. They were just like, if Tony's there, you have to vote for Tony to win. And the discussion would have been a lot more open if it wasn't Tony. And the stupid idea that like if Natalie took on Tony in fire and won, then she probably would have gotten some stupid votes because of that. And then it's like, yeah, so like even players like Boston Rob were like saying, I mean, he had this epic confessional. I still love the confessional when he voted for Tony to win. He was like, I said, you had to play the perfect game. You didn't get this guy out. Yeah. So I feel like, honestly, Rob would have been a sucker for it. He would have been like if she took him on in fire and beat him, and then she was up against Sarah in the end, he would have been like, oh, Natalie gets my vote. She took out Tony, who's the best.
Yeah.
And that would have been shameful. The fact that someone has to play so perfect just to fight this twist.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Tony had to play like the best game that's ever been played just to win.
Yeah. Because I did my top 5 kind of new school people, and Tony and both Sarah, they're two of my favorites.
Mm-hmm. And their whole arc is really interesting. The way that if you look back at Tony when he gets Sarah voted out, he's just like, he's applauding as she gets voted out.
Well, even when they first met, and she's like, "You're a cop, aren't you?" And he's like, "No, I can't even remember what lie he told her. What did he say it was?"
I do construction. No, I work tiles or something. I do tiles.
And then immediately it cuts to a confessional with her, and she's like, "He's a cop." So good.
And then apparently they had rekindled the relationship to some extent going into Game Changers.
Okay.
And then you just you got put out so quickly in Game Changers, which is, I mean, that's always the asterisk for Tony. If you talk about how great a player Tony is, the fact that every now and then he'll just have a game where he'll come out and play like he did in Game Changers, and he'll make a fool of himself.
Was it Game
And
Changers when they like right when they got to the island, he like ran and
he was
screamed
running
into
around, he was running around looking for idols, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of people are saying that he probably needed that Game Changers to happen in order for him to do so well in Winners of War.
Yeah.
It lowered his threat level to some extent.
Yeah.
And that's a big discussion I like to have, because Survivor to me is like my sports. Like, I've never been into sports, but Survivor, like, I can talk the game, and I love talking about the players, like who's the best. But the thing with Survivor is it's not like sports where it's almost an even playing field.
Yeah.
Survivor, like, you'll have really great players that just they win once and that's it. But then you have people who are brought back multiple times, and those are the people that are generally in the discussion for the best players. And the fact that Boston Rob won on his fourth time, and that was like a controversial thing that he was with all new people. Anyway, that's a controversial thing in the fan community, but like, people talk about that's one of the best winning games of all time, but he also did it on his fourth time. So what do you value? Like, how great a player is he? And it's like, some people, like, the true Survivor simulation would be able to run them through like simulations without them knowing each other each time and see how they would do in that aspect. But like, you take Winners of War, Boston Rob never would have a chance to win Winners of War.
No way.
Because he had his head on an island as a statue. And they did the interviews for this, like, right across the island, where you could see like Boston Rob's and Sandra's statues. And like, he literally mentions that in the interview before the Winners of War. He's like, yeah, we all passed statue of my head on the way here, so it's gonna be tough, but yeah, I'll figure it out. I'll find a way.
Yeah.
It's like, no you won't, Rob. but Tony did. I mean, Tony was someone who was like considered a threatening, or one of the lions in the whole lion versus hyena thing. He was considered one of the bigger ones, but he's like still like, it was a tier below the Boston Robs and Parvati's and Sandras of the world. So
yeah.
So I don't know if one of them would have been able to make it. That being said, Sandra did get herself out. I really would have been interested to see, because she was definitely going to make the merge, actually, at least for that season. I would have been interested to see how she would have fared in that. But that's what I'm talking about in the discussion for like the greatest of all time, or like when you bring players together in a thing like Winners at War. This is like, even if they're all winners, there's still going to be varying threat levels. People are going to be at a disadvantage just because of the way they played the game originally and what they're known for.
Yeah.
Boston Rob's known as this Godfather guy, so he can't come in and just play the Godfather role like he tried to. And Parvati, you can't give her any room to work or she'll do well, so you have to cut him out quick.
Yeah.
So you'll never get like a true discussion of like, what if all the best players came together and who would win? You just kind of have to speculate and talk about like who was the best in their season and overall who's the best player. So like, some of the best, what I like always is like the Mount Rushmore of Survivor, in terms of like, I saw someone describe it this way, which I thought was cool, where you have the Queen, Sandra, the King, Tony, the Godfather, Rob, and the Goddess, Parvati. That's the four.
Yeah, I mean, because when I was thinking about, when we were prepping for this episode, when you say Boston Rob, I think it's synonymous with Parvati, because you can't have one without the other in terms of like what the show represents and like just representatives for the game of Survivor. Parvati is right up there with Boston Rob in the same way that Tony is with Sandra or Sandra. Like, I just feel like, I think those are probably the four I would pick as well. Getting back to your comment about like, you were never really into sports. You think about the best people who've played the game. And I think that's the beauty of Survivor, why it stood the test of time, is that, it doesn't matter if you have like the Tom Brady's and the Peyton Mannings of the world, two of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, because of their talent, commitment, competitive nature. Like, that's not always the attribute that you look for in Survivor. You have the challenge beasts and, the Colby Donaldsons and Aussies of the world those are people like, granted, Colby almost won, but he took Tina, which was to his detriment and downfall. But more often than not, the challenge beasts don't make it far because post merge, those are the people that they're getting out pretty quick because they're saying, hey, individual immunity, I can't beat this guy in the end. Joe, he passed out in the challenge, and they're like, listen, that's sad and all, but if the guy's willing to pass out in a challenge after standing up, we got to get this guy out. What is he willing to do to win this game? So it's not always the athletic threats, but then you have the Parvati's of the world that are, manipulative and conniving, and they just strategy. They are just at the top of their game all the time, So, but Parvati was also a challenge beast. She played it both ways, but I don't think there's a one size fits all. This is what you need to do to win the game of Survivor. You look at each season, it's more often than not always different. And even for someone like myself that really wants to play the game, my brother-in-law was saying, well, like, are you going to train for 6 months before you go and get swimming lessons and go out and live in the wilderness for 2 months and things like that? And it's like, yeah, that might be, a nice little notch to my belt, but it's not, I don't think, going to be the differentiator in me making it further in the game. Right. Because Survivor, as it's continued to evolve, it's gotten more complicated and nuanced into what makes a great player. And it's not just about being able to swim well or, live out in the elements.
Well, and that's a big difference between classic or old school and new school Survivor, I feel like, is that before it was so much about the relationships, and you'd have people just sticking out alliances like pretty much throughout the whole season, and you were just loyal to each other, and you like grew really close. And it's like you have that every now and then. You have that moments of that, like with the Winners at War, the fire making challenge. Like that's a rare moment to have. Now it's just like everyone's a game player. They know the game so well, so they're just like, well, yeah, I'll switch alliances every vote, and they're just switching all over the place. So it's not like it's not so much about genuine relationships. Like they're still there, but more it's like people have just gamed the systems where it's just all so much strategy now.
Yeah.
But
well, I guess a question for you, something that has just driven me up a wall in frustration more recently with, I would say, the past 10 or odd seasons is tribal council talk. So people will get up, start moving around. People will literally go to corners of the set of tribal council and start having conversations to change a vote. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think there should be some kind of like restriction as to when you're at tribal, you can't move, but you can whisper?
yeah.
What do you think?
That's an interesting thing because in the past, especially in the seasons we're at now with Alec, it's wild to think about where tribal councils are now because tribal councils are just like there's not much really happens in the old school. It's just like, so how's your camp? How's life around the camp? Who's pulling the work?
Yeah.
But now it's like there's so much more. But also it's so much theater now too. So it's like you can't even take much of it. Everybody's acting the whole time and giving fake answers.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you don't even need the tribal council as much. But yeah, it really has devolved into a lot of whispering and getting up. The problem with that is that like I feel like it just needs to be communicated to the audience. When they're whispering and we don't know what's happening, it's kind of like you lose something there. The tribal council is supposed to be the time where you all just air things out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I get it, especially if Jeff's not going to enforce it. There's nothing like I'm getting up if I'm not sure of something. I'm getting up, especially if you see people whispering, and the fact that like I'm not gonna keep myself sitting if I'm like 6 people away from this person. I gotta hear what's going on over there.
Yep.
So it's like as long as Jeff's not enforcing it, which he hasn't been. Like I think I heard in classic seasons, he used to be a lot more strict about it. Like you just sit there and then you answer when I respond to you and stuff like that. But now he loves it. He's so giddy about it when they get up and he's like, oh my god, what's gonna happen?
When he kind of just sits there and smiles, laughs. Yeah, he doesn't really do anything to say, all right, guys, let's wrap it up. Now he might, and they cut that out because I've heard there's some tribal councils that go on for, 2, 3, 4 hours or something crazy like that. But we only get like a, 8-minute snippet of that. So I do wonder from like a producer standpoint or the people that are editing all this stuff together. One of my favorite comments from Jonathan Penner, I would consider him, I guess, a classic Survivor, he often told some of the younger contestants that hadn't been on before, know your truth on the island, because the producers are going to edit in such a way where they're going to highlight certain contestants and not highlight others. Rupert being someone that they showed all the best moments in Pearl Islands, but then I think it was in All Stars where they showed some of his lesser moments when he built the shelter and it all came crumbling down with all the water seeping in. So it is interesting to think about certain seasons where really difficult moments happened, or there are really interesting conversations that they chose to highlight or not highlight. It's always something I think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're not a fan of the whispering and standing up?
I'm not. I mean, to your point, I think it's frustrating because you always like to have some sort of an idea going into the vote as an audience member where the vote's going. Now, the element of surprise is also really interesting too, because you want to be surprised too, of like, oh, I didn't expect this person to go. But I think it's also so fascinating to think of like, how often does tribal play a critical role in who's actually going to get voted out that night? Like, how locked
Yeah.
in are people? I think in earlier seasons, maybe the first 10, 12, 15 season was whatever it was, alliances are probably, they have their mind up, they go into tribal, they know exactly who's going, whatever dirty laundry is aired at tribal doesn't really have any impact on the vote. Nowadays, at least the way it's edited, sometimes I think votes flip all the time at final tribal based on what's talked about, especially when people are running around and having conversations, sitting back down, whispering. It's tough to know.
Again, it's hard because you don't get the full transparency through the edit. So it's hard to talk about the game when you don't know entirely what's going on. Like, you break down an episode and it's like, well, they did all this nonsense and then this vote came out completely random, so I don't think any of that was related to what happened.
Yeah.
So I think at the end of the day, a lot of it is theater at tribal council. They come in with a plan, and even like some of the arguments they had, even like Winners at War, I've heard that, like, they plan to do these things and it's theater, but then the alliance really knows what's going on. But sometimes the whispering and standing up has an impact. I feel like that's when we should be seeing it. The problem is,
Mm-hmm.
like, it used to be cool when that was happening. It was like, wow, stuff's happening, but now it's happening all the time. It's just like just chaos.
Exactly. Yeah.
But like JT was the first one to do it in Game Changers. He was the first one to stand up, and
Was he
he
really?
walked over to the other side and to like whisper to Malcolm when they had like the two tribes come together for a vote, and that ended up in
Oh,
Malcolm getting voted out because GT blew it. And yeah,
that's right.
it was a big that was a big moment. But it's like, yeah, my argument has always been, because I've heard, like, even Rob Sesternino has talked about how he doesn't like the whispering. He wishes they would just have to sit in their chair. My only argument, or he doesn't like the standing up. He was like, whispering's okay. But my argument
Mhm.
against that is that, like, well, if whispering's okay, then I'm at a disadvantage if I'm like sitting. I'm not sitting right next to the right person. I don't know what's going on over there. So I don't
Exactly.
like that random element. So that would be my counter to be like, okay, well, you have to be able to stand up if you are going to be able to whisper, so that you can get in on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that has changed. One of the other things is that new, not since old school days have we had new locations as Survivor.
Yeah.
It's been Fiji ever since like 33, somewhere around there. It's been all Fiji since then. And I really think, as Jeff has talked about how he likes, because they just have a good setup going, and they're just like, they used to have the crew there, and it's better for
Yeah.
the families and stuff. And I get that, but I really think it would have. Well, I mean, that being said, we're going in a new direction with 41, but I was always saying that it would breathe new life into the game to have new locations. It would really freshen it up, because it felt like it was getting stale. You just see the same location every time.
Yeah.
And especially when the themes were getting so convoluted, it's like it would be much better suited to just have Survivor location, because and that's kind of what they're doing, minus the new location now is like 41. There's no theme, and that's better for me. But
Hmm.
still, new locations would be cool.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's fascinating to think about. They literally played the game in Africa. Like, it's insane. They had to keep watch at night for like lions. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's insane. Going to the Amazon and things like that. But I will say that, my wife and I, when we're watching some of these seasons, I think we love the beach setting because it's better for the contestants to walk around and conspire against other contestants and walk away from camp and actually have a chance to strategize for the game. But I think when you're in locations like the Amazon, you don't want to go out in the water and have a conversation with a couple people. Like
Hmm.
there's piranhas and all kinds of other craziness that you're going to run into potentially out there. Where Fiji, it's beautiful. You can walk down the beach, you can go out in the water, you can go back in the woods. So I think for that, it just makes sense for the broader context of the game, especially with idols. It's easier to hide them. All the other kind of things that they've added to the game. I think it makes more sense to have that type of setting. But you're right. I mean, I totally miss all of the different places they've gone to over the years: Tocantins, Cook Islands, Vanuatu, Pearl Islands. It's just I think that also played into the overall themes too. And since they've kind of gone away with 41, we'll see where it ends up taking them moving forward.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like the using the same location every time is just kind of, I don't know, takes something away from it. Uh,
Well, and I think they try to make up for that with Edge of Extinction and Currency. It's like, all right, well, we're not gonna change locations, but we're gonna add these additional, variables to the game that hopefully will spice things up a bit.
hmm.
But
I mean, and
sometimes,
that's an argument that a lot of old school Survivor players will say, because it's like when they see newer Survivor players complain about stuff, it's like, you don't have it nearly as hard as we had it back then. It's like, and they give them a lot more food and stuff. They're changing some of that from what I've heard in the new in 41, but they in recent seasons they've been getting, like, you get a lot of rewards, you get so much different stuff, and it seems like
mm,
just the quality of life out in Fiji is a lot easier than a lot of the stuff they dealt with in, like, Marquesas and
oh
Africa
yeah,
especially. But so I think there's something to be said about that. But yeah, there is the truth that when you get down to the game, it's like an entertainment level. You want people
mm-hmm.
to be in better spirits to be able to make the better and more interesting moves and stuff, not just sit around the camp all day.
Well, because I remember I
But
was listening to an interview of Jeff, and the person asked, "Is there any chance you go to like a really harsh conditioned environment, like where it's super cold?" And Jeff's like, "We've thought about it, but what would they do? They just sit at camp and like
yeah,
under blankets and just shiver, and then they go to a challenge and they come back, you know." And the same way when there's torrential downpours, they just sit in camp and they just hover over the fire and just wait it out, and it's not interesting TV. So, Fiji, I guess, makes sense for that.
yeah. So with that being said, what are your thoughts on the advantages, hidden immunity idols? And it's wild to think, especially where I'm at with Alec. It's like, wow, we're so far from where it's like now, and like tribal councils are crazy, and like immunity idols are like a given there, and it's
Yeah.
like that's a big part of it. And we haven't even gotten to Guatemala, where they introduced a measly little idol that you could use before the votes were read. And now we got like all those crazy idols and idol nullifiers, secret advantages, legacy advantage. You know.
I think it's just gotten away from the spirit of what made Survivor so special early on. I think hidden immunity idols were pretty exciting early on, um, especially when they introduced the element of like you play it after the votes have been read because then it doesn't influence the vote because that just never made sense. And I think that was just them trying to figure out how does this actually make the game more exciting, and eventually that you play them after the vote. But I think the secret advantages, being able to send disadvantages to people and stuff like that, I think it makes for exciting TV. But for someone that has been wanting to play this game of Survivor ever since I watched it in 2000 at 7 years old, I wish I was born about 10, 15 years earlier because I would have loved to play for like those first 10 seasons. And now it's like, it's just not even the same game anymore. And that's purposeful, right? Like they wanted to evolve the game in meaningful ways that make for crazy television. I just watched David versus Goliath, which was such an exciting season. First time I watched it, and one of the best tribal councils ever, where each advantage was played perfectly. The idol nullifier, like that was one of the most crazy. Like, oh my gosh, like hold the phone. This is the craziest thing I've ever seen because for them to play that so
And the
perfectly
mayor
with
of
Carl.
Slamtown got voted out.
Yeah, I
Just a
mean
couple votes.
everything was just so perfectly played, and I think when everything works out like that, it makes for exciting television. But now you have currency, and people are buying jars of peanut butter, and it's like, What? Like you win peanut butter at a reward challenge. You have to earn that, not because Parvati gets voted out. She gives you a petty token, and then you can go off and buy a secret advantage. That's
Don't get me started on fire tokens on that season too. That it was so they did not think that out either.
oh my
The
gosh.
fact that Nick got fifth place or got voted out at fifth place, and he was at a disadvantage against Natalie, who got voted out first in the challenge to come back. He lost all his fire tokens going out, and then he comes to Edge of Extinction. Natalie has all these prizes she's holding on to. It's like, okay, you got outplayed on the edge, Nick. Good job.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, I think that.
They don't think some of these things through. But
What about you though? I mean, do you like the hidden immunity idols? Do you like the secret advantages? Where are you at with those?
the hidden immunity idols were definitely a good
Hmm.
touch. I mean, I started watching Survivor in the Hans era when Russell Hans came out. And
The idol guy.
it was wild to find an idol without a clue. Though it was wild at the time. Now it's just what you do.
Hmm.
Uh, and like a lot of the most iconic tribal councils and iconic moments are from idols. You know, Parvati playing the two idols and Heroes versus Villains. That's an iconic tribal.
Sari not getting a single vote, but going out because there was
That's a
she.
shame. That's a shame. A shameful moment.
Oh my gosh.
That's that's one of the things I wrote down. Advantage Geddon is what they call it. Uh, it's that's the problem. I feel like the
Hmm.
fact that he's like, and for what it's worth, he was so giddy about it. He loves when these moments happen, but it's like, for what it's worth, your name's not written down on any of these parchment. It's like
When I
cool,
love that
yeah,
Sari was basically like, listen, if there's any way, I consider Sari a queen, right? Like right up there with Sandra, even though she never won. I think she's so deserving of winning. If there's any way I'm gonna go out, I guess this is the way I do it.
but
But yeah, that was
she gets robbed time and time again.
yep.
The fact that like that's when you know that there's too many advantages in the market here. It's like you literally have to have an advantage just to not get voted out. Because all of them just pile up. Like they knew it was gonna happen, but
Yeah.
of course it takes out the most iconic player left in Game Changers, which was that's a whole other thing. People was like, the cast of Game Changers is not really Game Changers. The fact
No.
that Sarah won, it was an impressive game, but she was not a game changer.
Yeah.
She shouldn't have been cast to begin with. It's like they do some weird stuff with some themes and some twists every now and then. I mean, people were not a fan of Redemption Island
Mhm.
as a theme. I'm not a fan of people coming back. Generally, that's much more palatable than Edge of Extinction to me because you at least you know about it, and it's like you could at least do something to work against. That being said, Ozzy just needed to win one challenge and he would have won. But there's I don't know. The problem with Edge of Extinction is that, uh, and with a lot of these things, they didn't know about it ahead of time. That's the biggest problem. That's why Ben is a controversial winner because
Mm.
they didn't know about the fire making challenge before this happened, and it ruined like he would have been voted out. So that's the problem is when the players don't know about things and they just kind of spring it on them, and
Yeah.
it's kind of nonsense, especially like when they would switch like the final two or final three to final two, and that's what got three snubbed that time. I mean,
Yeah.
all these things, the shenanigans, but it's like Survivor. There's a lot of luck involved, but I'd rather it be less on the part of production at the end of the day and just be how the game plays out.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you.
Um, but yeah, hidden immunity idols are like they really do change the game. It's so different to think about now. Some of the most iconic moments in the earlier seasons versus now. It's like so many idols involved. I do think idol nullifiers are stupid. I don't like the idea of an idol nullifier because again, that was something that Janet in Island of the Idols had to be the victim. Of course, she was the every time when they do the twists like this, it backfires on the people that like you're rooting for.
Yeah.
And like Janet was like, oh man, she could save the season here if she gets to the end. Janet was a good person to root for. She had an idol. It was already nonsense that she could use it, like Final Five or whatever. She was using it.
Yeah.
But the fact is, like, there was no precedent for an idol nullifier. But they had an idol nullifier. Uh, same thing with David versus Goliath. There was no precedent for that. And, like, shows you're just blocked. It's like the one thing that's supposed to be your get out of jail free card. Then you have if to account for that being nullified, you can't account for all this stuff.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is what's the incentive for like introducing an advantage when you have another advantage over here that discounts this advantage? I mean, it's like, what game are we even playing anymore? Like, this is not Survivor. This is nonsense.
And what about the change? I mean, what do you like better? Do you like a final 2 or a final 3 better?
I mean, I get the purpose of having a final three. I think Jeff has said, like, if it's a tie, basically the person that has the least votes or doesn't have any votes or whatever it is ends up going up to vote. I don't know if that's the only reason they have a third person. I like two because then it's very clear. Like, I think even with three people, it's very clear who the winner is more often than not, in my eyes, that it's between two people. Oftentimes people bring what they call, what is it nowadays, a goat, that this is the person that's not going to get any votes. What was the restaurant food chain lady? Older woman. She came and then they asked, like, do you think you're deserving of you being here? And she's like, yeah. And they were like, all right, stop talking. You don't deserve to be here. Was that when Cochran won?
Maybe. Yeah, I can't remember her name.
Blonde hair. She was like a multimillionaire. And then I remember, like, in her argument, she was like, in her case, she didn't say anything that made any sense. And then she literally stopped in her pitch to why she thinks she's the sole survivor and said, sorry, I'm really nervous. I don't know what I'm saying, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to answer your question, I like two better just because I think more often than not, it's between two people. And even in the final tribal conversation, most of the questions are directed towards two people, and two people tend to speak the most. The third person kind of just has a lot of passing comments oftentimes that don't get a whole lot of attention.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing for me with the final three is 9 times out of 10 it's a 0 vote finalist. They might get 1 vote, and they don't have any bearing on the final result anyway. And it's really awkward when you have this discussion when, like, even the players asking the questions clearly don't even regard this person. They just kind of like ignore them. That makes it even more awkward.
Exactly.
But I mean, the idea, I feel like, of the introduction of the final three, and with stuff like the final 4 fire making twists, stuff like that, is to get players to the end that otherwise would be cut at like this end point, and then you'd have a less satisfying winner. I think that's the idea. Because it's like the idea is maybe if we didn't have the final 3, then they would take that 0 vote finalist and bring him to the end, and so it would be like a slam dunk and not as interesting final 2.
Yeah.
Or like I feel like literally the final 4 fire making seems to be a response to Millennials versus Gen X, where David Wright gets out at 4th. So it's like David Wright was like the golden person of that season, like the one that quote unquote should have won if he made it to the end. So I feel like that's the production's way of being like, oh, let's try to get that person an extra step, so they don't
Another
just get
shot
voted out here. And they can win the fire making challenge and get right to the final 3. And so maybe get some more of the more competitive players in the end. But this thing, it just always backfires, I feel like, when they do that. And the way it was in Heroes versus Healers versus Hustlers, when Ben won in that fashion, it was not fun. It was not fun for me to watch. But
yeah,
it's like they try to shoehorn the game, and it's like, I get it, especially if you look at old school Survivor, where it's like Rob Sesternino voted out at 3rd, Johnny Fairplay voted out at 3rd. There's a lot of times you'll get like the one who's like running a lot of the shots, and it's like it just takes the one person to vote them out, just to know to vote them out right there, and that's all it takes. And so it can be annoying, but that's the nature of the game, and that's what makes Tony's win such a miracle too. The fact they threw in the twist final 2, and he still got Wu to take him to the end. So that's why it's so impressive. But
yeah,
definitely I would rather a final 2. I'd rather the jury not be getting bigger and bigger. I'd rather they go back to like a final 7 jury.
Well, with that said, then for final tribal, do you prefer like the 3 pillars of Survivor conversation, or do you prefer like each person gets to come up and actually ask the contestant? They get an initial pitch of why they think they're deserving of sole survivor. What do you prefer in terms of final tribal?
The old school way is much better. It's
I
much
agree.
better. The fact that Jeff sits there and he's like, he really wants to shoehorn into, we're going into the outplay segment. This is the competitions, and like, how you go into the outlast segment? Like, you all outlasted. That's why you're here.
Exactly.
Like, and it's like an open dialogue between the whole jury. The most iconic final travel moments come from the when you get the speech and you just get to let the juror talk, speak their mind, and just go off.
Well, and then you
That's
have
the
like the Sue
best.
Hawk incidents where she comes up and just there's always one person that comes up and just takes everything in the game
Yeah,
personal and just lights up one of the contestants. Like that makes for more interesting television than like I almost feel like it's backwards where it feels like the first 25 seasons would have been structured where they play on the three pillar conversation and then eventually they're like this is so bizarre and lame. Let's switch to each person gets to make their case why they think they should win and then each person on the jury then can come up and ask them a question because I feel like there's final tribals where people in the jury don't even talk. They're silent the
yeah,
whole time.
yeah. Because I feel like it works against some of the quieter types. Is like
Mm-hmm.
if you're just gonna like have an open dialogue, you have the same people running the discussions. Like
Yeah.
I'm the talkative person. Let me get in on that. But it's so much more effective having the just go because you can have a combination of like really effective, actually thought provoking questions to
Mm-hmm.
just like some just wild, outrageous questions that have no bearing on anything, like the one where they asked Parvati. I think it was Natalie Bolton asked Parvati. It was like, "How does this translate to the bedroom?" You know, she asked
Just
that
a
in the final
really
tribal, and it's like, whoa, okay, but it just makes for a wild moment. It's
yeah.
like
Well
they
then
should just have the right to say whatever they want. Like some jurors will be like, I don't even want to hear from you. I just want to say this, and that's it.
well even remember when Brenda goes up to Dawn and is like, Dawn, take out your teeth. Like it's like this
Yeah,
crazy moment where it's like, what is happening right now? Like that never would have happened if you were playing on the three pillar conversation, you know? Um
it's so good. I miss those
yeah.
moments. Uh, yeah, because that's what I always look forward to the finale episodes, especially with Alec, like to get to those moments where it's just like, because you'll have the jurors that no one that everybody thinks is a joke, so but they still get to have their moment. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll have the ones that's like, ooh, what are they gonna say? And then you actually get some good stuff. It's a good combo of everything, not just like, and especially when you get into the later seasons where they're talking about Edge of Extinction and they're talking about how do you implement idols and advantages? How do you navigate that? It's like, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I think it would just kind of far more organically come into the questions and conversations of the jury asking a contestant of like, you use this advantage here. How did you use advantages to your advantage in the game? That stuff is still going to come up. But I feel like
mm-hmm.
as the game has gotten more loose and fluid over the years, Final Tribal now follows this like checkbox template, which makes no sense to me. It's completely backwards to how the game's evolved.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that for 41 or maybe beyond, they go back to that structure because I feel like it's just, to your point, so much more effective. I think
It's so much more personalized. That's why you get the
exactly.
emotional moments where like literally in Vanuatu where Julie's just crying and like you're
Yeah.
just crying to the person, and then and these kind of speeches are what made it so effective against Rob and All Stars and stuff like that. It's like there's just
Even
people laying
Ozzy,
into you.
when he questioned Amanda back in, I don't know if it was Cook Islands or some other season, and he confessed his love to Amanda, like, during his speech and said, like, I took it personally that you voted me out. Like, how could you do this? I love you, all these
Mm-hmm.
different things. That's not coming out in the way they do things today, you know?
And it's just like I can't imagine like the All Stars in this format where it's just have people like yelling at Rob just openly. It's like, oh
That would have
God,
been,
I don't even want to hear that. Like he's trying to answer and it's just like talking over him and stuff. It
yeah,
would have been
chaos.
like it's supposed to be an open dialogue. I feel like this could devolve into more of a mess, and
Yeah.
just like they can pick on the one person even more. But yeah, that's definitely there's definitely some things I'd like to change. It's like there's a big question mark with a lot of things in Survivor 41. What are they gonna do with stuff? But the
Mm-hmm.
big thing for me also is like extended jury. Obviously, the Edge of Extinction threw everything out the window where they just like everybody was on the jury, which is a mess. But I mean, even in Island of the Idols, they stretched the jury to include Jack, who was voted out pre-jury. He was voted out pre-jury, so he hadn't. The whole point is you work with everyone, but for the first time they just extended it one person, so it didn't even make sense.
No.
These decisions they make sometimes, but
Yeah.
we still the game is just good enough at its core where it's still good.
Yeah.
And, you have players drive the game like Tony, who make it good in spite of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, hopefully, 41 will refresh itself and he gets figure some stuff out here. But
yeah. Yeah.
What about like themes? What are some of the themes you like? Like Heroes versus Villains is often seen as like that's the best you can get of a theme. That's like often considered the best season. I think it's definitely one of the best, if not the best.
I think one of the more recent ones that I really liked was just Millennials versus Gen X. Everyone seems to kind of crap on Millennials these days for a number of reasons. Many of them are very warranted, but it was just so interesting to see how Millennials would even approach challenges versus Gen X. Gen X would oftentimes just go after something, whereas Millennials were like sitting there analyzing something before they'd actually take action on a puzzle or whatever, like stuff like that. I think that was a great theme.
Second Chance.
Which one was Second Chance?
I love Second Chance. That's the one where they voted people back, and you just get they voted, the viewers just voted on players to come back, and
that's when Savage came back, right? Yeah, that was a good season. I hated Savage going out,
and that's one of the most iconic moments because of Immunity and Idol, by the way. So.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
The fact that Savage, the fact that Savage made it to. He made it to merge in Pearl Islands, and he got done dirty because of the whole Outcast twist, and he was so mad about that, and they brought him back, and he's like, he got himself into like the leader position again, and Kelly Wentworth nullifies 10 votes against her, and he gets voted out with like 2 votes.
Yeah.
He's so mad. He was so mad, and then Abby Maria was like, at least you made it to jury. You made it to jury this time.
Oh my gosh. That was a really interesting Ponderosa series too. I'm not sure if you watched that one, but
I don't know if I did.
You should. It's really good because I think Cass was on that season too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like her coming back to Ponderosa with Savage there, it was just a mess, but it was really entertaining.
Yeah. But yeah, I love that theme. That's one that people really wanted to come back. It's just the idea of giving players a second chance. It just works
yeah,
so well as a narrative.
One of my favorite seasons that has one of the worst themes, especially by today's standards, and even back then it was just not right culturally at all, is Cook Islands.
Yeah.
They literally segregated them by race. It's like, oh my gosh, that's so wrong on so many levels. But
I mean, it made for a more diverse cast.
It did.
That's the way they had to. We got them to do it, but
they couldn't naturally just have a diverse contestants.
Here we are. Survivor 41. That's one thing.
Yeah,
they have a more diverse cast for Survivor 41.
That they do.
And it looks good. I appreciate it, but it's like, yeah, they really did that in Cook Islands. I think very controversial at the time too.
Yeah. But I think that's one of the most interesting things about the show is that seeing like what was acceptable culturally back then and how that's evolved over the years. Like even the Amazon, they segregated by gender, and the types of discussions that were going on during that season was ludicrous that it happened, where Jeff literally opens for his tribal with the guys asking which of the hottest women on the other tribe. Like it was just ridiculous. But then also to see the evolution and maturity of Jeff and the types of conversations that he has led. Like one of my favorite ones was when, he talked about like gender bias with last names. Normally he would say Cochran and Donaldson and, all of these guys he'd reference by their last name, but never did it for women. And one of my favorite torches that he ever snuffed was Sarah's in Winners at War, because he finally called her Lucina, because that's what she wanted to be called. And she pushed for that, which I thought was awesome. And one of the probably worst moments of Survivor that led to a pretty powerful conversation was when what's his face outed Zeke as being transgender, and how Jeff facilitated that conversation was pretty mind-boggling, knowing what had happened and knowing kind of what he had to do, the shoes that he had to fill as the host of that show. It wasn't like they called the producers in and said, "Hey, we got to pause the scene. We got to figure this out." I mean, they just, at least the way it was cut, it seemed pretty organic into how it happened, the frustrations that were vented and aired, rightfully so, and how Varner like was trying to argue his case, and Jeff called him out and was like, "Listen, this is not okay. Like this was wrong, and you cannot justify this," type of thing.
This, yeah, such a crazy moment. The fact that it's like, the fact that someone thought it was okay to do that, first of all, and to think that it would even help them in a game sense, like how would that ever help you
Oh my gosh.
strategically? Just like, oh yeah, Zeke is very, very deceptive. I didn't think about it that way. Let's keep Varner. Like
So messed up.
there's no
Yeah.
logic there even. And then just imagine throwing away like your whole. You've been on Survivor 3 times, and you just threw your legacy away there.
A legacy from the game, but even as a person, like that's it's just so wrong on so many levels. And but continuing on the Jeff train of like how he's handled tough situations, like one of the most ridiculous scenes in all of Survivor 2 is Brandon Hance
He's giving him the massage.
going nuts. He literally, that was a tough massage he was giving him, and oh my gosh.
Brandon Hance, what a transformation for Brandon Hance from the meek little church boy in the first season, and he's like, I just want to be good.
Yeah.
Let's vote out this girl because she's making me think naughty thoughts. Like,
so ridiculous. And then Coach, after they win like community challenges, like, everyone get on the ground, we need to pray right now. It's like, why are you playing this whole Christianity thing up so much,
but then
Coach?
Brandon Hance just like, whoa, you see them the next season's completely different person.
Yeah.
It's like, man, the Hances have not been kind to that Hance.
Well, and the fact that Jeff even brought up, he's like, do you think this might just be in the blood of the Hance name or whatever when they were at that challenge? That was crazy.
So Russell Hance is a big thing to talk about as well. Russell Hance, who like is one of the biggest, like one of the most dominant players to just be like upended at the end, like so dramatically. Like, it's considered like one of the most bitter juries, But now a lot of the fan community has really just been like, I mean, the casual audience was always on board with Russell Hance, big fans of Russell Hance. But like more of the fan community have come to terms with the fact it's like Russell Hance just did not have a grasp on the social part of the game. He was just all strategic, and then he just blows it in the final tribal. He's like, you don't have a choice but to vote for me. What's your choice?
Yeah. Well, and the fact too that at the reunion he's arguing that if America was voting, they would have voted for me. And Jeff's like, that's completely counterintuitive to the game. And
the game is flawed.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Not a good luck. Like, he was always one of, especially at the time, he was one of my favorite players to watch because he's just like, he ran that game and the way he did the idols and everything. He was a really good villain, but I mean, in a sense, he also just was like kind of a dick to people.
Yeah.
He's he would just like call, like in Heroes vs. Villains, he just like called Rupert a dumbass. Like, Rupert, you're a dumbass.
Yeah.
So it's like he really did back-to-back seasons and got all the way to the end to lose. But I mean, he did get votes in Survivor Samoa. He just, if it was just a little nicer, he would have won. Like, he really got it almost perfect to set himself up. Like, he set himself next to people he should have beaten. He just had to be a little nicer. Like, you have to make people want to vote for you. It's like, it doesn't even matter if they think you played the best game. They can just not vote for you.
Exactly.
It's really hard. Like, even me, who I feel like I would be as objective as possible, like I respect the game and everything. It just would be so hard in the moment to vote for someone who's openly just such a dick.
Yeah.
And who's like so cocky about it when you could just vote for this nice girl here. It's like, you just got to make yourself a good option to be voted for. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
You gotta make people happy to vote for you and not be like, he humiliated me, he's a dick to me, and he played the better game. I have to vote for him. I gotta give it up.
Well, that's the thing. You can make really tough cuts and for it not to be personal. Like, I think Russell Hands, yeah, you're right. I mean, the social aspect was just so far outside of his mind. It was never an element of his gameplay. And with that, it's always going to bite you in the butt at the end because there has to be some level of personal relation to these people that are going to be voting for you to where, Tony can make an argument to say, like, listen, I love you. All right. But at the end of the day, we're playing a game and I had to make tough cuts because if you're sitting here, you win,
Hmm.
and they're like, oh, you know what, Tony? Yeah, you're right. We had great conversations, got to know you and, your family and everything like that. But Russell Hance is just like, he's just a bull that will literally run over anyone he needs to get to the end. He doesn't really care.
And that's the thing with a lot of the bitter jury argument. It's like, yeah, they are a bitter jury, but you could have done something better. It's not like you were just like, oh, it was out of my hands at that point.
Yeah.
It's like maybe you were too far gone at that point, but if you were just a little nicer along the way, you would have been just fine because you have the strategic part of the game. You got it. You got it.
Mm-hmm.
Boston Rob was one vote away. He just had to be a little nicer along the way. He could have won that. Um, in All Stars, I mean,
Yeah.
Coach is known as one of the biggest, like worst final tribal performances. Basically, like it's someone who went into final tribal being the likely winner and ended up losing. The Coach is one of the biggest ones that people bring up, to where he just couldn't own up to like using religion in any strategic way, or like he just
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't own up to it. I guess I don't know if that's his truth, that he really didn't feel like he did, but you also have to kind of read the room and be like, they
Exactly.
want you to own up to it, just own up to it, because he was right there, and just Sophie just came in and capitalized on it, and she was like, he was my little bitch, or something. I forget what she said about him, but like he was. I had him doing all my bidding or whatever. Like she just played it against him, and he was just sitting there, and just it was not going well for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was interesting for the longest time when they had returning players, they would always the returning player would make it to the end if they were there. It was up until like Edge of Extinction, I think that was the first time where the returning player didn't make it to the end
Mm.
in the final tribal. But before then, you ever bring back even one or two or half the tribe or half the cast being returnees, it would be one of them would make it to the end at least. So that was always an interesting statistic. And that was the big thing with the Boston Robs win. It's like a lot of people discredit that win because it's like the producers were just handed to you on a silver platter. They want Boston Rob to win. Let's give them all these newbies who aren't too hot at the game,
Yeah.
and fine tune it. Also Russell. It's always easy to forget that Russell Hance was on that season, and the
Yeah.
whole theme was built around them.
Yeah, either person. Yeah, which was interesting. Yeah, I mean, I definitely have more issue with that season after the fact, but as someone who grew up watching the early seasons of Survivor and kind of looked at Boston Rob as kind of like the Tom Brady of sports today, I kind of worshipped him and his gameplay, and I always thought that like he should have won All Stars when I watched it when I was like 10 years old or whatever. So for him to finally win, even though he like said like no one can leave the camp, like everyone needs to just stay right here, you got to give him credit for winning that final immunity. Like that was insane, running up and placing those blocks or whatever it was when it was
Mm-hmm.
probably 90 plus degrees outside. But as someone who grew up watching and worshiping the guy, I was kind of happy that he won, even though, yeah, the producers definitely just wanted another season so Boston Rob could finally win the game.
But that's the funny thing with like these dominant seasons. Like Kim is also known as a dominant winner, but
Mm,
like a lot of times these dominant seasons are some of the least favorite in the fans' eyes because it is kind of predictable. There's one person running the show. But
yeah,
I also really like that as like a fan of the game. I really like to see someone just really play the puppet master role because it's not easy to do and it doesn't happen often.
hmm,
You look at 9 times out of 10, all the winners aren't like just running the game from start to finish.
exactly.
But like, so it's cool to see that on display every now and then. Because even Tony was like very dominant in the second half, but he had to play under the radar in the beginning.
Hmm.
But Boston Rob, it was the Boston Rob show the whole time, and I mean he had
Yeah,
some good confessionals in there, some good moments. Where he threw the idol or the clue to the idol in the volcano, and he had some great moments.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's just the way he approached the game. That was like his perfect, like everything he could want from Survivor, because he loved playing the Godfather role, and he was able to just play that and just play into that in the confessional too. Where it was like, Matt, you shouldn't have come to me. You shouldn't have put my name in your mouth. You gotta go,
Yeah.
and then it just happens. Just he just does it.
Yep.
That was his dream, right there.
Yep.
And yeah, it's so that's why it's like, if you look at it as an isolated win, it's like one of the most impressive wins ever.
It is. Yeah. No doubt about it.
There's always just an asterisk there where it's like, where he did play the game 3 times before, a bit of an advantage. It's a lot of the cast weren't the best players. A lot of like newbies and recruits who didn't know much about the game. So it's like, yeah, but he had to get himself in the specific circumstances to even ensure the win. Like, he had to be up against Philip and Natalie in the end to really set himself up
Yeah.
for it. So it's still very impressive.
I think so too. Absolutely.
What else?
Trying to think here.
So who do you think is the greatest player of all time? Do you have a person that you would say?
I think it's probably Tony for sure. I think he has played the most complete game. I think he's also just one of the most entertaining contestants who have ever played the game. His adaptability, I think, is certainly commendable, and the Spy Shack and all the other like little spy whatevers that he's put together over the course of the number of seasons that he's played was really comedic, but certainly strategically speaking, I think helped him in many ways. So he's definitely one of my. I think he's definitely probably the best that's ever played. I think Parvati's right up there too. I mean, she's someone who I think is just a complete package in terms of like really dominated with challenges when it came down to individual immunity. Strategically, she's great. Socially, she's super likable and just gets along with people, regardless of whether they're people that maybe earlier on in the game she didn't get along with. She always found a way to find common ground with people. And that's something that a lot of people can't do, because at a certain point, contestants will say, like, listen, I already have a strong alliance over here. She always found a foot in the door, I think, with people. And you gave her an inch and she took a mile every single time. So I think she's a really dominant player as well. Yeah, I mean, I guess I want to know your answer, but I also want to know, is there someone that you think played a really great game that never has won? Could be someone that you just really took a liking to, like Sari, or someone that you just played really a dominant game, like even Johnny Fairplay. He's one of the greatest villains of all time, but he also ran the show, and in the eyes of many people probably thought he should have won.
Mm-hmm. I'm inclined to think that Tony's the greatest to ever play.
Yeah.
It's really hard, but it's also hard to like debate. Like, Sandra, objectively, she won twice, twice in a row. But there's also always the element where it's like she came into into Heroes versus Villains being one of the lower threat levels. Like, she wasn't a dominant winner. So it's like both of Tony's wins were more impressive than both of Sandra's wins in a way. But also, Sandra did it twice without having the little game changers moment in between. She only had game changers after winning twice, and she still played pretty darn well for what it's worth there. And she ended up just getting like swap screwed in that season. She was actually in a pretty good spot. And then she played really well in Winners at War until she screwed herself. So it's like, and Tony can thank his lucky stars for that, because she was apparently just gonna gun for him. She wanted Tony to go in that vote. That's crazy. And Tony, after the fact, he was like, he had no idea. He was willing to work with her. So it's like, Sandra is objectively, she's the queen, but yeah, I wouldn't say either of her wins are super impressive, but that's an undeniable fact. Parvati is a great all-around player, but it's also, there's always like, she didn't win her first time. So that's when I'm thinking of the greatest of all time discussion, it's always tough to think, because there were so many people who went out where Parvati went out and didn't get a chance to play again. So she just as easily could have been just another Survivor player.
Yeah, it's true.
One of the greats if she didn't just get the chance to play. So that's why it's like, so much luck involved. Just getting the opportunity to play again, you know,
Well, I think on
to
that
cement
same
your legacy there.
going along with that, I think that season Yule is definitely strategically one of the strongest players. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so methodical and how he would play out certain votes in tribal councils and thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead. I mean, he just probably seems like I never want to play that man in chess because I feel like he'd beat me on the first move, you know? And how he was able to rekindle a relationship. I think it was with Jonathan Penner, who they kind of wrote each other off at a certain point in the game. I think he's a great first time player
Mm-hmm.
and winner, for sure.
And that's why it's tough. There's so many one-time winners where it's like they're not in the discussion because you haven't seen them multiple times.
Yeah.
And also, if your first time playing is so impressive that you win, it's like you're not going to have impressive showings afterwards because people aren't going to play with you.
Yeah.
You know, like I mean, Kim had like one of the best wins, but she did as best she could with Winners at War.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's tough. It's tough to like compare when you have it's like Brian who won Survivor Thailand
Yeah.
could be the greatest I've ever played.
Yeah.
You know, it's just yeah. There's a lot of question marks with it. That's why I would love the reality where you could just see the simulations play out, where all these you put all the best players together, not knowing who they are, and just see who
Mm-hmm.
would come out on top. That's the dream right there.
Yeah.
But unfortunately not. So unfortunately, it's like you can only be so seasoned a Survivor player. You know, now these people have been 4 or 5 times. You can't come in and really have a fair shot at and expect to win. Really,
Yeah.
it's like Boston Rob. If he comes back, what are you gonna do? They're not gonna let you play, and he
No
only
way.
plays one way. That's the problem. Tony like adapted a little bit. He laid low. Boston Rob was incapable of doing that. Like from the jump, he was running the show on this tribe,
Yeah.
and it was still impressive the first few episodes that he was still like actually running things. But it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna come back to bite you. Unfortunately, it was because of a swap, and he ended up with like the two players who he had the worst history with on his tribe. But yeah, just like certain play styles do not lend themselves to playing again afterwards. You know, if you're
Yeah.
known as the cutthroat puppet master, it's hard to work with you in a future season.
Yep.
You know, if you're the sociable, likable winner, it's a lot easier to get into that alliance.
Yep.
But yeah, in terms of the best to never play, I still like Rob Cisternino, Johnny Fair Player, still the ones that come to mind. Sari,
Mm-hmm.
obviously,
Yep.
consistently robbed, and she'll never win as a result. Now she got screwed, and the fact that she made it so far in Game Changers and could have won, like that was her chance. I feel like their last
Yeah.
chance, and now you bring her back again. They're not gonna make that mistake. It's they won't let her play. There's
Yeah.
people you can't let them play.
Well, and Rob Cesternino is an interesting one, and maybe it was because of the way they cut All Stars, but I love that scene where he just goes off for hours on end, and I think it was maybe Boss and Rob's confessional that it's like this guy's over here like taking coffee breaks. You know, we're out here building a camp and shelter and
Mm-hmm.
everything like that. He just definitely, for how strong he played in the Amazon versus All Stars. I mean, it almost seemed like there was just something off mentally for him.
But it was another case of the threat level thing. And you
Yeah,
know, we talk about All Stars. The fact that Amber won All Stars and she was not an All Star, she shouldn't have been there.
it's true.
Like, in
Yeah,
fact, Boston Rob was able to do well because he was not the biggest target going into it. He got out pre-jury. You go into the season, I feel like Rob Cesternino's in the worst position, being he didn't win, so he didn't get any money, like the prize money, but he also ran the season up until the point he got voted out. So he's known as that guy, and
hmm
so you're not going to work with him. And so that's why you get all these players voted out early, like the winners and the strategic people, because they already know how your game's played. So that's the problem when you bring people back. There's always the question of the threat levels comes into play,
hmm
you know. And if
yeah,
you're super impressive your first season, it's tough. It's
yep,
tough for you. Well, that's why it's impressive, you know, when a winner like Parvati is able to come back and do really well. When Tony is able to come back after not doing well in Game Changers, but then still do really well.
hmm
That's why those are so impressive. But yeah, it's tough. There are a lot of really great players though, and in terms of Edge of Extinction, the thing I think of is that like Rick Devens is such a fun player to watch,
Yep.
and the fact that they screwed themselves over with their own twists,
Yep.
taking out what would have been a good resolution to the twist, like
Yeah.
that was where like if they ended it at merge, then you have Rick Devens as the winner, and it's like wow, that's a great story.
Yep.
But they bring them back at the final six, and he takes out the guy who actually had a good story there, and it's like oh Chris Underwood's their winner. Doesn't feel good.
No, I'm
And
with you.
it's because like he had such a short list of what he needed to do. It's like okay, I need to do fire making challenge, and beat Rick Devens, who would win otherwise. And then it's like okay, well I took out the best, so what are you gonna do?
I mean, it's admirable that he went up against him, but it's the same thing with Natalie coming back after being on the edge for 38 days or whatever and winning. Like it doesn't seem right.
It's just insulting to me because like Gavin, who's sitting there next to him in the end, like Gavin is not the most exciting player in the world, but it's like he lasted the game. And he has to sit there next to this guy talking about his experience on Edge of Extinction to other Edge of Extinction people who he lived with this whole time, like growing closer to them. Like he literally lived with the jury all this time while he was playing the game.
Yeah.
And then he just sits there and it's like, okay, I'm losing to this person who got voted out third. Okay, cool.
Which I like Gavin. He's a little quieter. You're right. He wasn't the most exciting contestant, but I still felt like he made convincing arguments in Final Tribal, but didn't win.
But it's literally he lived with. You can't have him live with the people that are going to vote for the person to win.
Yeah.
Reem, who got voted out first, she's not going to vote for Gavin. She's going to vote for the person who she got close to that whole time.
Yeah.
Says you can't fault the players. You have to fault the production for giving such a bad system there.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's Edge of Extinction. I could talk about Edge of Extinction all day.
Hopefully it doesn't come back.
Hopefully not. It seems for the foreseeable future it won't be coming back, but you never know. You never know.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we need to touch on? I feel like there's so much out there as Survivor.
I don't know. Favorite contestant, moments. I pretty much covered all that good stuff. Favorite seasons.
I guess my favorite. I don't know what my one favorite season would be. I'm inclined to say Heroes versus Villains. I'm due for a rewatch on a lot of these seasons that I haven't watched in years, though.
Yeah.
But Heroes versus Villains, Pearl Island's up there.
Yeah, a couple of favorites from like old school seasons. Amazon, Pearl Islands, Palau is a big one, which is why I'm so excited for you guys to react to that one next. That's such a fun season. Cook Islands is up there. Tocantins I really liked as well. With JT, that was good. That's JT's season, right? When he wins. Yep. And some of the newer ones, Kage-yan's great. Winners at War is right up there. I mean, I think it's just outside of my frustrations with the Edge and Fire Tokens, just the stuff that goes down that season, it's definitely up there as one of my favorites. And even David Goliath, I'm a little recency bias with that one since I just watched it, but that's a really great season. And I like Nick as a winner too. He's a great guy.
David versus Goliath, yeah, great. And Second Chance is great. Cal Rong, I think, is a really good season.
Yep.
I love Ty.
He's the best. He is my favorite.
Ty, what an iconic moment when he rejects Scott's idol, like the super idol. What was it called? Where they were supposed to bring their idols together.
And yeah.
It was so awkward.
Yeah.
He's like, you're not doing it? No.
No. Such an animated guy too. And then he got the CO award too at the reunion. Yeah.
Good guy. The fact that like he is never the strategist or anything. He's just so likable.
Yeah.
But the fact that he made that decision that like really told how the rest of the season was going to go, you know, he was part. It was also funny that he was just like with the group of the villains basically.
Yeah.
And then it was like Scott and Jason, the two villains of the season. He was with them, but basically they didn't treat him well enough. So he was like, we just turn the tracks in the season this way.
Yeah.
Because they were locked basically. Like there was a point where they were like, they had idols and stuff to where they were like, oh, we're set up. We can just we can get to the end here.
Mm-hmm.
with us three basically. But he just decided, nope, just gonna go this way, and Michelle's gonna win instead. And but the fact he still made it to the end is really interesting. He still made it to the end, but
And that's also the season 2. Was that when that one guy had to be helicoptered out? Like he
yeah.
passed out and almost like literally died?
Well, he no, there was
Or
Joe,
is that a
old guy Joe. He had like bowel movement problems or something. He had to
No,
be
but there was that
medevaced.
one challenge where it was brutally hot and
Oh yeah,
then
yeah. That was all. That's true. Yeah, it was the medevac season. They had
yeah,
Caleb. Caleb got
Caleb, because
medevac.
they like broke the fourth wall and Jeff was just like, everyone in production, we need water, we need
Yeah,
umbrellas, we need everything. That was crazy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's a good season though. I was in the Aubrey team Aubrey camp,
Oh, I
by the
love
way.
her. She's so great. I can't. She's another one that I wish had won.
Yeah, and then she came back in Edge of Extinction. Wasn't her best. Wasn't her best showing in Edge of Extinction, but
Yeah.
Kelly Wentworth is fun player too.
Yep. She's great.
David Wright. I mean, all
David's
those
good.
three were great. David Wright was like my favorite millennial for Gen X, but
When I feel like Joe too, I forget his last name, but I feel like he's this generation of survivors, Ozzy.
mm-hmm.
Where I feel like back then Ozzy was just lauded as being the survivor beast. He's a dolphin. Like how he's just a crazy swimmer.
Joe's in a lot
Um.
of controversy outside of the show now, but
Oh, is he?
yeah, well, he's into some weird like cult, like man cult stuff, and like anti-vaxxer and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
So
Interesting.
he's probably not going to be on the show again, even if I always thought he shouldn't have been anyway, but because he in Edge of Extinction he didn't do too hot. He was like
Yeah.
he was painting on the flag or on the banner or something, and then he just got voted out. He didn't do much.
Yeah.
But and I felt like you get enough out of that certain archetype. You can't.
Hmm.
They're gonna play the same way every time. There's only
Yeah.
so much you can do. But
Very true.
I mean, Ozzy was actually one who had a couple of times where he was close to winning.
Hmm.
Uh, but he's also one where he's like he missed his chance. I think he missed his
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah. I don't
But
think he's coming back.
but again, I don't know. There's a big question mark in like what our players going to be coming back because I mean, Jeff described it as a fresh start with the new season, but I don't know.
Yeah, there's a couple people that I would love to come back. I mean, Rick Devens being a big one. I mean, he's just I think he would do well coming back, and I also don't
Mm-hmm.
think that he'd be like a Boston Rob where everyone's like, we need to get him out immediately. I think he's someone people would be willing to work with a little bit.
He's the prime candidate for like a second chance too. If they did that, people want him back for sure.
And then Christian from David versus Goliath, I think would
Yeah,
be another one I'd want back too.
he's great.
Yeah.
He's great. I mean, the biggest theme idea that people have always thought would be something eventually, like for like a season 50, would be Survivor Legends, like just
Mm,
legendary players. But then when I was playing through the cast and what it would be, I'm like, I feel like half of the winners at Warcast would be on that season again.
yeah, I'm with
Like,
you.
and it's like these players, like even Sandra and Rob, who said they were retired or whatever, they're still like talking about, oh, I'm ready, getting ready, I want to come back, back for the next season.
Yeah.
But it's like I don't know if they're done with them now. But either way, I feel like it would be half the same cast again because you'd have to bring back Tony,
Hmm.
Sandra, Rob, Parvati. Uh, those are guaranteed right there. They need to be back, and probably a lot of them in question would be like Sarah. Um,
Yep.
Sari would be like one of the few ones outside of the winners that comes to mind.
I
And
think
then
Cochrane's another big one.
you can maybe shoehorn in someone like a Rob Nino or Johnny Fairplace kind of person. Even though they
Yeah.
don't have the legacy, it's just like they have the one season. But
I doubt Fairplay would ever get um
yeah,
asked back because his relationship with Jeff Probst is not good. I don't think. I don't
yeah,
think Jeff Probst likes him at all.
that's a lot of the undercurrent for a lot of like why people won't come back. Richard Hatch also doesn't have a good relationship with Jeff, so he'll never. And even outside of the controversy, like he would never come back probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, but like a lot of the legends I think of would be like a lot of people who played together already in Heroes versus Villains and Winners at War. like the coaches, the Colbys.
Yeah.
It would be a lot of the similar ones. Russell Hantz. So
Well, and
it's
that's the
like,
tough thing too with a Legends season like is like when I even mentioned Cochran, it's like, is Cochran really a legend though? He played 8 seasons ago or whatever, because I think someone that played 2 or 3, 4 seasons ago could still be considered a legend in the same way that All
Mhm.
Stars. How do you cast All Stars when you've only had, 7 seasons of Survivor?
Well,
You
yeah, and the
know,
problem with Legends is like you can't. It's really hard to justify casting someone who was just in a season and played once.
exactly,
You're not
like
gonna say
Rupert.
Rick Devens is a legend. Yeah, you're gonna bring back Rupert again.
Yeah.
It's gonna be
Um,
literally all these people played together, like in some way,
mhm.
basically. So
Yeah.
it would basically be like another rematch, and it's like, okay, now not only are we gonna get Rob, Sandra, Parvati out first, but we gotta get Tony out first too. Okay, let's get all these guys out of the way, and then you get like the least legend of them all would win somehow.
And yeah, depending on all the different advantages that are at play. But it would be interesting if part of the Legends season for 50 went back to almost like they pitched it as an old school game of Survivor where all of the idols and all of that kind of stuff went away and they went to like the bare roots of Survivor.
That's a
That
big
would be
theme idea
interesting.
that fans have wanted for a while, like Survivor back to basics.
Hmm.
But Jeff is Jeff is not gonna let it happen.
Yeah.
Literally, there was a whole thing. There was a video where they like gave like theme ideas to Jeff, and like he would give his thoughts on them. And that's the one who's like, yeah, I don't see that happening because we gotta have idols and stuff.
Yeah.
He loves it.
It would probably make for very boring TV, to be honest.
I don't know. It would be really interesting if you got, especially if it was like Winners at War kind of level cast with Back to Basics. How do they navigate it?
It'd be
But
interesting.
yeah, Second Chance 2 is up there. Here's vs. Villains 2, where a lot of themes people want. But again, it's a question mark with the themes. What's gonna happen? Are they gonna do themes again?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hmm.
But yeah, also like Best to Never Win would also be a fun season. So where you can
That'd be
actually
awesome.
not have a lot of the same people in there. So then you could have like a Rob Sister Nino in there. You could have Sari would come back again. You could say Ozzy and Colby, like they weren't too hot in their latest showings, but they did have ones where they were very close.
Hmm.
Uh,
What about? I know Jeff's been asked about it before, and you've had celebrities on there before, but would you be down for a Celebrity Survivor?
I'd be down. I don't know.
How interesting it would be.
I don't know how many people they'd get to agree to it. It might be like more of a celebrity apprentice situation if you ever watched that, where it's like they're not really celebrities. Like they're like C-list, D-list celebrities. They don't have anything
Hmm.
going on. So it's like, I guess. I mean, I would watch it. I'd watch any Survivor basically, but it's always an interesting thing when you bring in the idea of money, because apparently Mike White in David vs Goliath was like he was kind of feeling bad in the final travel, so he didn't have a good final travel performance because he was like having a hard time justifying why he should win over this country guy who
Uh,
needs it.
yeah,
So he didn't put up that much of an argument. Like when they asked him, like, why should we give you the money when you're like successful Hollywood guy? And he's like,
that's
didn't.
tough because I think money should very rarely, if ever, be a part of the argument or question. Like if someone makes the case of like I need this money because of X, Y, or Z, like it's do or die situation for me versus someone over here that makes millions of dollars and owns an oil rig in Texas like Russell Hantz did.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing, but I don't know. I mean, I loved Mike. I love the way he played the game. I could have gone either way. I think Nick versus Mike is certainly a conversation worth having, but I don't know. Money coming into play at Final Tribal is always an interesting thing.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate reality that you can't deny, though. It's like, again, it's hard to, if you even try to be objective, it's hard to vote for the person who
Yeah.
clearly doesn't need it when one person could definitely use it. But yeah, that's why a lot of people will lie. Well, that's what people lie about a lot of stuff. They'll lie about their careers and stuff. A lot of times they'll lie about careers because they think it'll make them seem smarter or more manipulative,
Hmm.
like a lawyer. But then a lot of the times you could lie about your career because you could say they don't need the money, and that's an easy excuse.
Yeah.
And that's why it was so impressive about Jeremy when he won second chance, because he kept it hidden that he had like a son on the way. Basically, his wife
Hmm.
was pregnant and everything, because he knew that that would be something they could hold against him and not want him to be in the final tribal against them.
Yep.
So you have to know what to conceal there. That's another thing with like the David versus Goliath theme. It was like a pretty effective theme, but I also don't like the fact that it you can't help but have it play into the season.
Hmm.
Like if someone went into the season planning to like lie or underplay their career or something, you can't do that now, because like that's part of the theme. You're a Goliath, so you can't act like you're not something you are.
Yeah, because I think someone when they first made camp, when they went up to Mike, they're like, "Have you been on TV before? Like, I feel like I recognize your face or something like that." And it's like, "Do you play it off?" And say like, "No," but it's like, "Well, you're a Goliath, so why are you here? You're clearly here for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
and it's because you're a Hollywood writer."
And if you have that working against you, if you're a Goliath up against a David in the end, it's like, you want the Goliath to win?
Yeah,
Come on. That's why
rooting
the
for the underdog.
shoehorning the themes is not great. So I'm excited to see a season without a theme for the first time in a while.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Anything else? If you were to play Survivor, that's a dream of yours now, right?
It is. Yeah.
Uh, how would you play? What's the plan here? I mean, for me, I always say I need to get swimming lessons, just because
Hmm.
that's a good excuse to vote me out early. It's like it won't, in the long term, it's like maybe not so much, but it can be an easy thing to vote someone out early if they're really holding you back in like a swimming challenge or something.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't want to have that working against me. So I'd at least do that. But I would have to underplay. I always felt like I should get like contacts, just so I don't look like too much of a nerd. So it's like, oh, that guy knows the game.
Well, even
He's
just from like a physical aspect, you don't want to be going to challenges with glasses on,
well, yeah.
So you'd want contacts just for like the physical piece of it for sure.
But I always feel like the super fan look can work against you a lot. It's like, oh, you can't trust that guy. He knows the game inside and out. He's too smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it would be a big piece of it is diminishing your threat level in any capacity. I think it'd be tough for me not to seem to downplay like my social butterfly nature and just getting along with people, being very sociable, personable, easy to get along with, um, and not feeling or seeing being perceived as someone that just wants to work with everyone, and not being able to stick to a plan. I think that's something that I'd have to work with and kind of be super fluid in that way of if all these different people are coming to me, I got to be able to work with certain people, not with other people, but making those people over there feel like I'm working with them, just because I feel like I'm such a social person. So that would be difficult. When I think about contestants that have played the game before, I feel like I'd always model my gameplay after someone like Jeremy, just because he was always playing for something bigger than just I love the game of Survivor. Like it was very apparent even in the season that he won. Like I'm playing for Val, I'm playing for the kids, like I'm playing for my
mm-hmm.
family, and that would be true for me too. Like I love the game of Survivor. I'd consider myself a super fan, but at the end of the day, it would be to provide a better life for my family. So I think that would be something that I wouldn't like be like coached in terms of like praying and making that clear of like this is who I am or whatever. But I
Mm-hmm.
think making a point in case to say like, hey, I'm playing for my family, be super social. In terms of athletic ability, I think I'm pretty athletic. So keeping that somewhat under the radar earlier on, doing enough in team challenges where I'm helping my team win, but not to the point where it's like, gosh, this guy is the dominant force for our team when it comes to any kind of athletic ability. But even still, like when post merge, you still have to fly somewhat under the radar with that type of stuff. So it's just a difficult balance to strike in that regard. But at the end of the day, I think if I'd model my gameplay after anyone, probably be someone like Jeremy.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy's one of my favorite players to watch too. He's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, I've always been. I'm like super. I'm not confident that I would do well in Survivor at all. I mean, first of all, there's a whole luck element to it.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, I have a feeling I'm gonna go out there and I'll be the first person voted out, and it's like, but I still feel like they'll be better than not playing. I'm like, okay, I was still a part of it, but it would be cool to have to make your mark on the season and like win. Obviously, would be great,
Yeah.
but to actually be like a memorable part of Survivor history would be cool.
Yeah.
But again, it's like as a super fan, you have to not think about that too much because there have been so many super fans who go in there and they just like it gets to their head too much. They play too hard, too quick, and then it's just they're out quick.
Yeah.
So it's hard. Like it would try to. I feel like I would have to try to underplay this how much of a fan I am too. That being said, like the new season, when I was looking at the cast, a lot of them seem to be really big fans. In some of the earlier or seasons in the 20s and 30s, they'd have a lot of recruits who didn't know what the show was or had only seen a couple of seasons. But now it seems like they're getting towards casting more super fans, so it'll just be like so much strategy and playing the game hard.
Which is tough. I feel like I ideally be playing with a group of people where there's a mix of both. Because when you have all super fans, nobody's sleeping. Everyone's just sitting there staring up at the sky, thinking about their next move.
Looking
And
for
that's
idols.
yeah, looking for idols, never sleeping. Which that's what Jeff wants. That's what the producers want. So I'm sure moving forward there'll be a lot of that. But it is what it is.
I feel like you could get some pretty good confessionals in there. I want to just like say out. I was always thinking just saying outrageous stuff and see what the producers would do with it. It just makes no sense.
Yeah.
And we're just like really dramatic, over the top. Like not like I wouldn't mind being like the villain role, but I just don't know if I would be in a position to actually do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what they want. I mean, they don't want, boring, straight laced players. They want the people that in the confessionals are saying the most outrageous stuff,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Ultimately, I really don't know how it would play. It's really it's hard to plan for it. You have to get out there. I feel like it could be pretty good with connecting with people, but it's harder until you see it in practice. It's very different.
Yeah. Well, and then also just the shock of it all, of there being all these cameras on you, all these boom mics around you, the crew that we don't see when we're watching the show, right? Unless you see behind the scenes footage. Like, I think there's an element of getting over that, oh, I'm on a reality television show,
Mm-hmm.
that you'd really have to get over.
I just don't want to make a complete fool of myself. I don't want to be like the one of the worst vote outs or just like really fall on my face, and just get myself voted out when I'm in a good position. Be like, yeah, I know these people. These people want to get me out, right? And it's like, no, we weren't planning on it, but now we are. Okay, yeah, you just put the target on your back.
Yeah, well,
Something like that.
there's a big paranoia piece to it too, because if you are constantly in the back of your mind thinking like, I don't want to be the first person voted out, I don't want to be the first person voted out, then you basically put a target on your back. You write your own story at that point. So I think there is a big piece of it of quiet confidence, where you don't make it known to people. But
yeah, and then you just like just play cool, and then you are voted out first. And
yeah,
it's like, I should have, I should have played more paranoid.
yeah,
I should have played harder.
yeah,
Dang it. And so it's like, okay, not only did I give it up first, but I did nothing exciting. Cool. I just kind of sat there.
yeah. You still made it on the show though.
Yeah. I would like to at least add some entertainment while I'm there. That's what.
Yeah, make it interesting.
Yeah. Anything else? Survivor. We talked a lot of Survivor. It's been
I love it.
very open discussion of Survivor, but if you come back next week, we're going to go specifically into Survivor 41 gear.
Mm.
We're going to do a draft for the season. We're going to break down the cast, talk about some of the murmurings of what the season's going to be like, some of the promos and stuff. So that'll be cool. I don't know how much coverage. We haven't really decided yet how much coverage we're going to do of the season overall. Hopefully, we'll get a good amount of discussion in there.
Yeah.
And it'll be cool because it's like, I like talking about old school Survivor, but it's also cool to be able to talk with the new stuff as it's coming out.
Yeah.
I'd like to have an outlet to do that.
Nice and fresh opinions.
Yeah. All right. Is that it?
I think so. That's all I got. This has been an awesome discussion. I love the freeform nature of it. I think the less structure, the better with these types of things, because then you and I were just kind of feeding off each other with our love of the game, love of the
Hmm.
show, love of the contestants, and how the game's evolved. So
I
it's
love
been fun.
I love Survivor. I love Survivor. It's one of those things where it's like it blows my mind that people aren't involved in Survivor. It's like you're missing out on the whole world over here. The fact that it's like over 40 seasons now, no signs of stopping. That's insane.
Yeah,
Insane.
no, it really is amazing.
Um, but all I ask is that when you go in Survivor, that I have to get some compensation. That's all I'm asking.
Okay, well, I mean, if nothing else, you'll get a shout out. I mean, in one of my confessionals, I can't
Work
guarantee
it, yeah.
the
You gotta
producers are
work. You
gonna.
gotta sneak it in there so they won't
Yeah,
notice. You gotta get some like inside joke that will reference it. But
I'll
you
just
can at least
eventually.
in your preseason interviews, you can talk it up. You can be like, yeah,
Yeah,
Tarqaron, ZachArcher.net. Yeah.
exactly. I'll just say, hey, after Palau, I wrote off the show until my friends over at the Tarqaron podcast,
I owe
invited me
everything.
on.
I owe
Yeah,
everything to them.
exactly,
I'm
exactly.
playing for. I'm not. I'm not playing for myself. I'm playing for them.
Not
That's
my
your
wife.
confessionals. Yeah.
Yeah, not my family. My boy Zach
Your
and Alec.
impassioned final tribal speech.
Exactly. I'm sure
You
that'll
know,
go well with the
it's
jury.
a big moment. It's like I'm not. You know what? I have to tell you guys something. I'm not playing for myself. I love this game, but even more than that, I'm playing for my boy Zach back home. Yeah.
This is for Tarkaron and the Otaku Brothers people. All right, bringing
Yeah.
this home for them.
And I'm donating 100% of my winnings to them.
To Tarkaron Productions. Yeah.
Like, wow, okay. And the other person's like, well, my mother's dying. So,
Exactly.
so that's tough.
All right. Forget Rusty.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, what video would you recommend our viewers watch after this?
So in the same way that I was able to sway my wife into watching and then falling in love with Survivor, of course, I hope everyone that's watching this particular episode has been caught up on Survivor, or at least has watched the majority of the seasons. But it's always nice to go back and revisit one of the best seasons of Survivor in Survival Pearl Islands, I think season 7. So why don't you go back and watch the Tarkaron reaction to that very first episode? Super memorable. Rupert steals the shoes.
That's right.
It's just good times. So
Which was voted the most iconic Survivor moment of all time or something in the All
yeah,
Stars reunion.
that's
Yeah,
right.
good stuff. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to our podcast feed. Like the video. Leave a comment. Hit the notification bell. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and like us on Facebook. Tarqaron TWO. All right.
I'm pointing to my Survivor hat. I don't have a Tarkaron hat on.
Yeah. It's next week. Come back next week. Survivor
That's right.
41. It's on the horizon.